I think over the past 2 years, we have been in a bit of a state of doubt, or the industry has been in a state of doubt towards Facebook ads. And I saw on Northbeam's most recent newsletter that they showed like 69% of overall budget from their users was on Facebook right now. So I feel like we're past that state of doubt or uncertainty in the platform. Where do you think we are right now with Facebook ads? And from a high level perspective for 2023, like where should people be prioritizing or focusing their attention? I'm sure there's a lot of areas we can dive into there.
Yeah, definitely. I think right now it's an interesting place where we've been. I mean, we went through a place where clients really saw the return on ad spend immediately in Meta, and that's what they trusted, and that's what they felt good about. We went through then, 2020, 2021. I mean, 2020 obviously was like crazy with the uptick of everything that was taking place online and life shifting online. And 2021 was much in the same. And I think all of us really went from a situation where we could trust those numbers to where we couldn't with iOS 14. And now we're rounding the corner back where Meta's becoming more accurate. On a click basis, certainly, which they always said was going to be the case, but I think we weren't as trustworthy of that for very good reason. Because of what, they termed early on federated learnings where, we're looking at accounts all together in an anonymized data set. We're going to be able to look at and see, here's what actually attribute these conversions properly. So I think that has led us now to, there was a year ago, we're speaking, here on March 17th in 2023. I mean, I think a year ago, everyone was really hot and talking about TikTok, and there was a lot of budgets being shifted onto TikTok. And we're now in the situation where a lot of people have tested and tried, and I think they've shifted, in a lot of cases, money back. And not everyone, and there's certainly people that built great TikTok strategies, and there's ways that can be a great part of your funnel, but it's still the predominant platform. It's still kind of brought us through the fire because there isn't another place to go that has the prospecting power and the daily active users that Instagram and Facebook do. It's just, at least in the Western world, right? It's just, I think we all wanted something else, and I think that we did diversify spend, but there's a lot of optimism going into 2023, for the numbers lining up for a lot of reasons. The numbers lining up, the ability for us to not have to potentially, maybe you don't need a third-party tool all the time for attribution. I think third-party tools have proven themselves helpful in a lot of other ways. I think ASC, Advantage Plus shopping campaigns, give people a lot of hope. That's a scalable solution. So yeah, it feels a lot. It feels a lot better. I mean, there's still we've all been through so much that it still feels like a total. It's like if it gets too good, it's like whatever that's called. You're like, oh, this can't be good for this long.
Just waiting for the bad to come from it.
Yeah, right. Because that's what you're used to. I mean, that's what you know, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I saw you were recently talking about the discrepancies or potential discrepancies between third-party tools like Northbeam and Foxwell and Meta, and how we may have a lot of marketers moved dependency over to those tools when we had that disruption with iOS 14.5. Right? Could you maybe dive a little bit deeper on what you're seeing or what people you're talking to are seeing in terms of using third-party tools versus Meta, and where your point of truth is, if you feel like it's possible to have one point of truth with things?
Yeah, definitely. I think everybody's in a different boat as it relates to this. And I think that there's not one answer that applies to every single person. I think there are certainly people in the camp that, they brought on a third-party tool. It became, for attribution, it became an integral part of what they do to make decisions from an attribution standpoint and from a business operations standpoint. And I think to those people, it's going to continue to be critical for them to make decisions, because it has become not only the way they make decisions, but the way their team has made decisions, the way that their client has made decisions. And in combination with Meta, it's something that they're using. I think then there's people in the camp of they tried it, they don't feel that it did anything in a huge way any differently, or like it's not making a difference now for attribution. There's people that kind of only use, let's say, the surface of these products. I mean, a lot of, if we're talking about Triple Whale and Northbeam and Rockerbox, like, well, they're business like ops tools now, even more. And so I think for some people that only use it for attribution and they only use the pixel or whatever, it's a less stickier product. It's just like anything else. If you only know one part of it, you're not going to continue to use it, and you're not going to see the value of it in long term. It's going to be harder to convince you. So for those people to say, there's certainly a camp of people that said, hey, I used it, don't think we need it anymore. We're operating only on Meta-Click. And that's really what we're optimizing off of, that and utilizing GA. So, I think if you're a person that looks for, you're wanting a single source of truth, the answer is, in today's market, there isn't going to be one. Like, you can use one of them, you might look at more often, but I think that if you're trying to scale, you're trying to run a real growing program or a sustaining program, and especially if you're spending a lot of money on a lot of channels, a lot of money, let's say your overall, I think if you're spending anywhere north of like, $75,000 to $100,000 a month across marketing, like, I think a third-party tool is almost essential, because even if you're not using it as the daily North Star, there are features in there about lifetime value, about new customer CAC, about, and being able to see customer, like, funnel flow, and, and that's a real part of it that I think can live alongside post-purchase surveys and things like that to make decisions. So we all got spoiled in a lot of ways early on, but it was like, you could point at it and say, I spent $1 and I made $3, like, let's keep going. And now we've had to, I think a lot of us, and myself included to some degree, right? We've had to, over the last 3 years, become better marketers and really get back to the basics of like, what are we trying to fundamentally do here? And how are we going to convince people that they need this thing that they didn't even know they needed, which is a lot of the world that we live in. Those of us that are spending forward on Meta.
Yeah, ads are less about growth hacking and more about who are we talking to and what do they want to hear, or what are their pain points, right? Do you currently use any zero party tools like post purchase surveys or anything for attribution as well?
Yeah, and I'm not any longer, but I was a part owner. No, a post purchase survey before it sold. Just to be open about that. So I'm a big believer in that. I mean, as a marketer, anything that you can add to your toolbox to help make decisions is going to be helpful. And if you start to use post purchase surveys in the right way, it can pay for itself. Like, it's wild, the stuff that you can do. I mean, people say they saw you on this, and then you can say, sure, do you want to follow us there? Do you want to, engage with us? Do you want to sign up for our SMS list? Like, you can build these segments. And I think understanding your customers more deeply as you scale is a way that it's like building the foundation of the house. Like, if you go in and buy a house, you never are like, I wonder what the foundation is like. And, and it's like one of those things that if it's not underneath you, you won't notice until you really need it. So I'm a big fan of that, because it gives us more. Just like, big fan of using motion too, right? It gives us more answers, more information than less, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and I had Jessie Healy on here recently, and one thing that she was definitely talking on was even pick up the phone, call customers. Have customer surveys. There was someone else I had on the podcast that was talking about, ideally a CMO or a business owner is, making one call a week to talk with a new customer to understand, why they bought the product, how they feel about the product.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think That's one of the simplest and like greatest pieces of advice that I ever had. I had a colleague that he was an expert on design thinking, and it's just this sort of niche topic, and sort of like our world. And I kept asking him, how do you get to understanding like what people are needing, because he was trying to sell these like really complex consulting packages in huge companies. And he said every week he made 3 phone calls. He would like set up purposefully 3 phone calls, and he would set them up like 6 weeks in advance, right, to like find these people. Hey, I want to hop on the phone. And because he had enough industry cred that people would hop on the phone with him, and he would just like be like, what are you thinking about? And that's how I think about the membership that we're building now. I mean, that's a whole other can of worms, but that is so powerful, because a lot of times when you're deep in it, like you're not gonna know, right?
And, with the membership, sometimes I wonder, is this actually Andrew in here? He's so involved with this. He's so in tune with things. And I see you are actively engaged with it. It's very cool to see those things.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, the founders membership, it's something that I always felt like we needed in our world. I feel like a lot of us, I know a lot of us feel alone a lot that do Facebook advertisements or like digital advertising generally. So that's really why we started building it, and why I am in there, and why I haven't outsourced the community management of it, because to me, that's the work that I think I should be doing, is supporting you guys. And I mean, obviously running my own agency too, but like making sure that I can understand and see daily the concerns. We just installed a new sort of analytics platform in the membership, and there 435 people, 250 million on monthly spend on average from our group on Meta, on a monthly basis. And there are daily over 20 posts and like over 70 reactions on average over the last 30 days daily. So it's a ton to manage, but that shows you like how much we all are like, does this make sense?
Mhm.
So, because a lot of times as a founder, you're like sitting there Googling agency owner. You might have one agency friend, but in this
Yeah.
sense, I think that's been more powerful than I would have imagined.
I love it. I love it. And so I know, we talked about the changes from iOS 14.5 with attribution and tracking. And, there's been industry movement with media buying strategy as well. Hot take on my end. I don't know if you agree or not. I'd love to hear your opinion. I think, Meta, Google, even TikTok are moving towards trying to automate pretty much everything on the media buying side, which is going to take a lot of priority away from media buying and more towards creative strategy. But with that, we're seeing, less about 1% and, super defined audiences and, tons of different campaigns and more of consolidation, right? Could you talk a little bit about, um, I hate to use the term best practices, but like, what are you seeing winning right now in terms of like campaign structuring and just overall account setups? Are you seeing the more simple, the better, or?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Unfortunately, I agree with you. I mean, the I think there's a couple different things at play. One of them is, um, one of the benefits for a long time of meta ads was the complexity of the setup, and the ability for you to micro target. Um, Obviously, shifting into a world where meta has less data, that has become less powerful. And we don't have, you know, you remember we used to have 1 day remarketing audiences, or seven, and it would always be titled hot, they were like ready to go. And we don't have that anymore. And we can't have that anymore, because there's just not as much data. So by the natural part of what's taken place, there has to be consolidation, because it just that style doesn't work anymore. But it's a lot of kind of what we were talking about earlier in reference to attribution, what we all were trained on, which is we were all trained on the ability to be really complex and always like, oh, what's that new lookalike audience? Or I didn't think about that. Or here's this new strategy, and so those days aren't totally gone. There's still Shopify audiences we hear about. There's still interest clustering and, that kind of thing. But I think overall, definitely consolidation is more part of the game. And so if you think about, what does it look like that's successful right now? I think a lot of it is, there's definitely, if you look at prospecting, there's definitely some kind of broad campaign running. It might be an automatic bid, it might be a cost cap, but there's some broad audience running. I think there's also some Advantage Plus shopping campaign running with, 1% of it sending to existing customers and 99% of it sending to new customers. And I think there's probably some interest clusters that are not on CBO, that are on ABO, built on customer personas. I think that as it relates to creative, a lot of those are going to be built off of pre-existing creative that has social proof. So because of that, there's probably also some sort of a testing campaign that you have running. And people do these very differently. It depends on what the most common is like you have 3 to 5 ads that you loop in every 2 weeks and you test them in your testing campaign. And if they work, then you can scale it in the testing campaign. People call it like scaling in place. And then you used to graduate things and now we don't do that as much. If it's working, keep it working. The testing campaign's running to a broad campaign too. They're running in parallel. There's 2 broad campaigns running. They run in parallel to one another. Very common. And you're testing all different types of creative. And I think the remarketing setup is very consolidated. It's 180-day engager, 180-day website visitor. Like it's all lumped into one for the most part. If you have a lot of traffic, you can do 30-day. But if you have, it's harder to do that. And it's the efficiencies I would say it depends on who you're asking and what tool you're asking about. Like, oh, that's a good idea to do the 30-day, et cetera. But that's commonly probably what we see. I would say that the creative being the lead on this is definitely the case. And I think with creative, as it stands now, the piece that I've really come to learn in, let's just say this year, I mean, I knew it last year, but it was really, it's become so loud this year is, the cuts in videos and how sharp they have to be, and you trying different hooks with the same body, or trying, a different 3-second intro with the same core message, or, like that work. And the idea of producing that creative is really a laborious thing that a lot of us have had to figure out how to generate and really turn into like creative shops. And that's a big change of what we're doing. I think to comment on like the overall agency structure, or the overall agency landscape, one is like those setups where there's a lot of agencies that have said, yes, creative is important, and I'm going to build my agency to be a creative shop, and that's where I'm going to make more incremental dollars for my agency. I think that that market, people have flooded to that, but I also think I still think there's an opportunity to do that. You don't have to say we're a creative shop, this is all we do, while also having creative offerings from your agency. So I think a lot of the feeling now that I get from a lot of brand owners is, people, you say the word agency to brand owners, are like, I don't know, it depends on who you're asking. And I think there's a way for us as agency owners to say, I don't, maybe we don't need to do a retainer right away, but we're going to do a partially outsourced CMO model, or we're going to train your internal team over a 6-month period. Or I just think there's not enough of us that are offering those kind of creative solutions that could turn into a 2-year contract. You have no idea, but like
versus just cookie
versus
cutter,
just saying cookie cutter,
yeah.
here's your retainer,
Yeah.
whatever. Because I think a lot of other people have shifted into creative strategy. So if you shift into unique product offerings and unique service offerings, your services are your products. I think there's a possibility for your business to continue to grow. But anyway, that's like a classic Andrew Foxwell answer where you ask me one question and then I go on for like 10 minutes.
I love it. No, I love it. I love it. And so I'm curious, and we were talking about best practices, right? The broad with audiences. We have campaigns for testing creative. We have campaigns for scaling. And we're talking about specific best practices for creatives. When you come across a account that's declining, and I'll go ahead and say I realize there's a ton of variables here, but when you come across an account that's declining, and you see that best practice would say, right, we need to really improve production of creative, right? We need to be focusing on creative because frequencies increasing, we're seeing burnout, we're seeing decline CTR, rise in our cost per click. But of course, from the client perspective, things are needed like quickly, right? And maybe the creative production can't catch up with what's needed for performance. Long question to eventually ask. Like, how tied are you to best practices versus, okay, we go broad, but maybe we test a 2% lookalike, or maybe we test, a 5% lookalike, or test new audience or new creative. What's your thoughts there?
I think when you see one of the things that's great about being in this world is that I could look at any account you're running, and you could look at any account that I'm running, and we could have ideas of things to change. Right. And your account that I have all these ideas of changing, it might be performing well. Like there's so many variables that the marketplace leads itself to a lot of like one-upsman type stuff, which is a real challenge because there are different ways to do a lot of the same things. And there are different pathways to be successful. So when you look at an account that's declining and you go in and, start to sort of diagnose your own way, I think that it's important that if the person is doing this, that's an outside person, it's important that we give context to say, this is the way they're doing it now. I think there could be some adjustment because this is the way that I think about it, but it doesn't mean the way that they're doing it is wrong. So I think that's like one thing generally as a result of it. I think that overall, if you were to say like, all right, look, Andrew, across the board, what do you see in declining accounts? I mean, we audit a ton of accounts. We audit honestly, I bet you it's like 25 accounts a month now, because of how many members we have, and in the membership, you get a free audit. A confidentiality agreement with all these people. Like I can't talk about who it is specifically, but I would say that the most common thing that happens, the most common thing that we see across the board is there's a bunch of legacy creative that has a ton of social proof and it has stopped working or is appearing to have fatigue, and people are really freaked out, and the owner of the business, doesn't want to create new creative, or they don't know how, or they feel stuck by that, or they're tied into the idea that their brand is needing to be represented, and the type of UGC that you're suggesting or the type of creative you're suggesting isn't representative of their overall brand. So that's a very common one, is like, the client won't get us new creative. Like, what can you do? Right. I would say another one is being overly dependent upon only one audience. I think that there's a lot of people that, sing the praises of broad only. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a broad campaign. I think that's great. But in my opinion, you can't only have a broad campaign. I think having diversifying across different audience types is good. And, in terms of, let's say, even if it's just an interest cluster, and then diversifying into having Advantage Plus shopping campaign, like I think having more than one thing, I think is helpful. So those are kind of does that answer your question about kind of like commonly that we see?
It does. And, I guess a shorter way to ask the long question I asked is just the idea of getting boxed into industry best practices versus just testing new ideas, right? And it sounds like you're kind of on the testing new ideas side of things.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. You did ask about best practices. Sorry, my brain went sideways.
No, you're okay.
Yes. And I mean, best practices is like totally relative. I mean, whose best practices are we talking about? Are we talking about meta best practices? Because like these people have no idea what the hell they're doing.
Yeah.
So
Very fair.
I mean, let's like these people aren't us, right?
Yeah, very fair.
Like they haven't. I mean, if Meta hires like one of our colleagues who's been like in ad accounts like we have for 13 years. I mean, I've been doing this since it was invented. So like DR specifically. Don't bring me in some person that worked on Hershey's freaking brand account for 7 years. It's worthless to me. These people don't know anything about DR. And so, unless Meta hires someone and then they retrain the whole sales staff on here's how you do this, and they stop abusing us with phone calls and emails, sure. But I mean, best practices, I think that is one thing that's a real challenge in our industry. So the best practices generally though of going more towards consolidation, I think is good. But I do believe that I learn something new every day in our world. And so there isn't like there's kind of generally accepted, but there isn't a like I mean, one of the downsides about doing courses is like I spent 7 months creating this course last year
The
on
scaling one?
it was called assessment action ascension. Yeah. And so, this thing is like create like 9 hours of content or something. I mean, it's like everything I could do to train junior media buyers. And there are parts of this that are out of date now. And I mean, we've put updates on it and everything else, but like that was what it was at that time when we recorded it. That was last fall. So it's a wild world, but I think you have to have that idea constantly that you could be wrong. And the times when I have personally been kicked in the butt, and I think others could say this too, is when I've tried to make things too rigid and say, okay, when it's this, do this. And it's just like to some degree you can do that, but to some degree you really can't. You kind of have to reassess that often.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And, one question I have for you in terms of your interest in Instagram and Facebook shops, right? So I know when iOS 14.5 happened, it became apparent that Meta was really bullish on owning data. I mean, we've always known that, but keeping people on the platform to have that data. And, from my perspective, and you may have seen differently, but from my perspective, when we first tested out shops ads a while back, they didn't really perform. Honestly, conversion rates were horrible on them. We, in an account recently, had the $5,000 credit that pops up at the top of your ad account. And we cashed that in, and it was for shops campaigns. It was for a clothing and apparel company. AOV is $60-ish. And, we've seen since we started running those shops campaigns, like a consistent 3 to 4 ROA on that. Now it's the ones that run it to either shop or website optimized that way. But what's your thoughts on, shops campaigns? Do you feel like Meta's going to start, preferring that in the algorithm and trying to push more marketers towards that area? Or
Yeah, I mean, so there's two answers to this. One is like, I believe they really want it to work. And I think that they pushed it and gave advertisers a lot of credits to utilize it. And we utilized it and the results were mixed. And now they're giving us credits on Advantage Plus shopping campaigns because Meta needs something to talk about to raise their stock price. So I think that's one thing that we always have to be discerning about is like, is this actually working or are they just like pushing it to work? So I certainly think there are certain accounts, and there are those accounts we had for a long time, all of us, and those of you that are listening to this, I'm sure like understand, and now Cole, you get this. When you discover that account that can operate profitably on dynamic ads for broad audiences, you're like, beautiful. They're like it's like a diamond in the rough, right?
we audited one 2 weeks ago they weren't huge spend, under 10K, but all they were running is DPA, and they were seeing a
Yeah.
5x ROA, top and
Yeah.
retarget.
Right. So like you run, so like these are like one in every, let's just say one in every 50 accounts that I see, there's a DABA running and it's killing it. And you're like, thank you, God. And I think that is what I think that's the same with what I've seen with shops. I think there are 1 in 50 accounts that it kills it on shops. We have one, and we have had hundreds of thousands of dollars of shops credits from Meta for this particular account, and it's killing it, and it will not stop. It's just like lighting their business on fire. So I think it depends on the use case. I think it depends on personally if the target market is women between the ages of 35 and let's say 55, I think it can work 55, 60. I think it can work beautifully because women are on Instagram, specifically in stories and in feed very often in the United States and let's say in the Western world, but mostly I can speak to the US. And that'll work really well. So I think there's hope with shops. I think that there's a lot more that they could do. I think that the idea that the user can choose to go to the website or to the shop, I think we're getting there. My fear is around all this is now that Meta's fired a bunch more people now again. So it's like, where are those people getting fired from? Like, are they getting fired from Zuck's like dream project about like whatever the metaverse, or are they actually getting fired from like the teams that we see that are being worked on? Because there's technical errors all over the place with shops early on. Some of you might have run into this where you run the shops test, and then your client's like, my money's stuck in PayPal. I can't print shipping labels properly. Like, there was all this like back end crap that Meta hadn't solved for. And so that's getting better. But yeah, I mean, as with everything, there's so much nuance to it. So yes, like I think there's possibility for certain accounts to do shops well. And I think over time, is there going to be more adoption of shops? Yes. Over time, will it become viable? I think in terms of being a mainstream, a part of what they're doing, I do believe it could be the case. And I would say the same thing with Reels. Like it's possible. It just depends on how it's continued to roll out. It depends on the education in agencies and how they're talking about it. But everything now, because they've seen such great stuff on ASC, that's all they're talking about now. And so shops has taken a back seat. Who knows what happened? Maybe shops will become part of ASC and it's just all one big umbrella. It'll be like the Power Five, where it felt like they just threw everything under the Power Five. You're like, I'm talking about this one business manager question. They're like, yeah, but have you done the Power Five? And you're like, that's not my question. Yeah. Focus.
Spend more, Power Five. Those are the answers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All the time.
Speaking of other buzzwords, I mean, creative. I know you said a lot of people are moving towards creative strategy. As we're talking about creative in the account, I mean, how much priority do you feel like businesses should be moving towards creative? Do you feel like businesses are prioritizing it enough? I got a lot of questions here. Do you feel like there's a certain budget percentage people should be putting towards creative testing? Like just overall creative, what's your thoughts?
Oh man, I mean, definitely in the first question, I think you should be dedicating 10% of your overall budget at least to creative testing. I don't think, because things are going to burn out, and I don't think you can be in today's world with Meta without doing a concerted effort towards creative testing. What was the other question around creative again? Like,
there was a lot of, and I'm gonna be honest, I forgot. I'm just really, creative in general, right? Do you feel like businesses are prioritizing enough? And I mean, where is your focus when it comes to creative right now?
Yeah. I mean, my big thing is like, how do we build a team with our clients or with a partner to have a consistent inbound flow of creative? Of different ideas and tests, because I think that some of it is, we are to some degree, not always. And let's just say, if you look at the overall percentage of the creative strategy that we build for our clients, I think to some degree, 10 to 20% of that, you have to be chasing trends. Like, I think you have to be trying things that are popular on TikTok so that even if it's not on TikTok, it's on IG, you have to like be trying to mirror that to some degree. And I mean, I'm like almost 40, so this is like a full-time job for me, like stay on top of trends, right? But I do think that's important because it's going to look more native and it's going to be more successful. And you don't have to like copy the dances with your holding your clothes or like wearing the clothes of that client. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm just like being aware of it and being like, this seems to be interesting. Like, the way that text is outlined differently now and filters or whatever. So I think that's to some degree what we're doing. I think the creative strategy, the other parts of it are, you know, I saw something yesterday that Jess Bachman from Fireteam posted that I thought was pretty inspirational to me. Let me see if I can find it here. And he has a Venn diagram of three different circles. What's true that we can say? What does the market want to hear? And what others cannot say? And that's what they're aiming for in the middle for when they start working with clients. He's built a whole creative strategy shop. And so that's we had been doing that without this like beautiful framework he had. And so that's like, it's always like, what can we say that others cannot? What are, kind of like developing it that way. So that's kind of the work that we do. And I think, we work with partners. I mean, I haven't built a creative strategy side inside our business necessarily. Like, we work with partners to produce a lot of this, and people that are able to cut things, more and combine them and mash them up in the way that we need to test. So that's kind of my general view of it. I don't think it's not everything that we're doing in media buying, and I think that or everything that we're doing as an agency. I think that a lot of focus has gone there, and we've also tried to continue to focus on landing page optimization and like CRO for clients as well. And that's something that I think, one of my closest friends is Zach Stuck. And like, that's something I think Homestead has done beautifully, is built a landing page division as well, and testing the 5 reasons, the listicles. And I think obviously Nick Sharm is doing this with hooks. Like, the annoying thing, as I said on another podcast recently, is like, we went from doing one thing to now be successful, we all have to do a lot more. And so when it comes to creative, I think that role has expanded tenfold in a lot of cases. So yeah, that's my general feeling on creative at this point.
And what's your hot take, or what's your feeling on AI being used for creative? Because I know everybody wants to be in this AI trend, and excluding Chat GPT for like copywriting and stuff, but actual visual creative. Do you see any viability and performance with that type of creative? Do you think there will ever be any type of interest with that for you?
It's hard to say. The stuff I've seen of like images or like videos that are totally created by AI, I think there probably will be a place for that. I'll be totally honest with you. My first thought when I saw some of this like AI created video was, I was like, pharmaceutical companies are never going to have to hire actors again to like act like they're at a kid's swim meet climbing around, and it's like, you may experience erectile dysfunction, and you know what I mean? Like, they always have to like create some narrative of like what the person is doing. It's so awkward. So AI can do that now. That's maybe good, maybe bad for actors, but I think in our world, having to sell products, like, I don't know that AI creative is going to be like something that's going to convince people over time. It could be. But I don't at this time. At least what I'm privy to. I don't. I think people want to see real stuff, and I think that what we've seen a shift from like more high brand to, you have massive CPG companies doing deep, like kind of TikTok style,
Ugly ads.
Ugly ad style stuff. So they're copying what we're doing. So I think for now that probably won't be a huge thing, but I think in certain industries, sure, absolutely.
Cool. Well, look, at the end of every episode, we ask the same kind of rapid fire questions. So these 3 questions for you. If you had to summarize everything we talked about today into a marketing mindset for anybody listening, what mindset should marketers or business owners have when it comes to Facebook ads for 2023?
I would say optimism and curiosity. Probably.
I love it. And for anybody listening that's in the stage of figuring out what they want to do in the marketing industry in their career, what role or roles would you say are going to have the highest demand or opportunity in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think creative strategist is good. I think people that are able to connect dots and data and tell stories is huge. And I think CRO is probably going to be another big one.
I love it. I feel like CRO gets overlooked too often from companies, so I could definitely
Mm-hmm.
see um, there being a lot of opportunity to fill that gap that way. And tell us, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn about Foxwell Founders?
Yeah. So I'll offer to anyone, happy to do a discount for anyone that's listening to this on the Foxwell Founders. Just email me at andrew@foxwelldigital.com, or just our website's foxwelldigital.com. And you can learn about the membership at foxwelldigital.com/membership. We're redoing the landing page as we speak for our membership. So it'll be, hopefully by the time you go and this is out, it'll be all new and fresh and look fantastic.
Awesome. Andrew Foxwell, the legend when it comes to Facebook ads. I say that strongly. I appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.